Hey everybody, and welcome to my ninth how-to video for 2022. I've been having so much fun thinking about the different topics that I want to cover and share with you. And today I am going to share with you how to apply a risk-based approach. This is a term that a lot of you may have heard in your work in compliance, as you study and all of that. So I think it's really important to cover it because it reflects a shift in how regulators have acted previously versus how they have viewed risk management today. But before I jump into that topic, I just want to say welcome to all the new subscribers. Thank you for joining my channel and enjoying my content. I love hearing and reading the comments that you guys share with me about, once you discover the channel and start to consume the content. So really grateful for you to be a part of this growing YouTube family on this channel. Don't forget to click like and don't forget to subscribe. And hey, while you're at it, you might as well share the video with somebody who you know is going to benefit from all the information that I'm going to share. But anyway, enough about that. Let's jump straight into this video. So, a risk-based approach. Historically, regulators used to be quite prescriptive about how they expected you to meet your regulatory obligations. You must do that, you must do that, and you must do it this way. But then ultimately, over time, they realized that businesses were very different. They had unique operating models, and sometimes being too prescriptive about how things should be done, down to, dotting your I's and crossing your T's, was actually resulting in harm to some people because it just didn't make sense for their businesses and would turn out to either be astronomical in price or require heavy resources and just was not suitable for the level of risk that they were dealing with. So ultimately, regulators started moving to what is called a risk-based approach, which is a popular approach for a lot of regulators in a lot of countries. It may not necessarily be the case everywhere, but it is quite prevalent. And what this basically means is that regulators now expect that you have a clear understanding of your business, its operations, and the risk that it faces as a result of the activities that it is engaged in. And as a result of that understanding, you're then going to put in place controls and mitigating measures to manage that risk effectively that is suitable for your business. And that essentially is what we're talking about when we're talking about your risk-based approach. It's having an understanding of your risks and being able to put in place mitigating controls to manage that risk at the level of risk. And when I'm talking about risk, we're talking about the amount of damage or loss that your business could potentially face if an event was to occur. So you need to put in place controls that manage the risk that is posed to your business. So it's really about giving each business, whatever industry you're in, the opportunity to self-assess and identify the best ways for themselves to ultimately meet the regulatory objective. This doesn't mean that some things are not going to be prescriptive in regulations. There are some things like you must provide your customer statements. You must do KYC, for example, where it's very black and white in terms of the approach that is expected. However, there are certain things where potentially they can say, we're not going to prescribe to you the controls that you must put in place. We will just say to you, make sure that you have controls in place. How you control it depends on the business that you are doing. So one of the things that it means is that you need to be able to prioritize. But for you to be able to prioritize, you need to have done the initial risk assessment process. So if you're familiar with this channel, you've probably already watched the risk assessment video. If you're not, check it out. It's really great. One of our most popular videos so far. But for you to be able to prioritize your resources and make sure you're putting in controls and focus in the right area to manage your risk, you first need to identify and analyze your risks. So at the base assumption, when you're looking at a risk-based approach, the assumption is you have identified all of your risks, you have risk assessed, your risks, and you now know what are my high risk areas, what are my medium risk areas, and what are my low risk areas. And once that has been identified, you are then able to say, now, how are we going to prioritize our resources, our time, our technology, and the different controls that we're going to put in place to manage our risks, to ensure that we are putting focus and priority on where we face the most danger or potential damage and loss, and where can we kind of have a much more light touch approach, not ignore, but a light touch approach. And that essentially at the heart of it is what we're looking at when we're talking about a risk-based approach. So when we're talking about risk-based approach, it's not just, oh, our overall business is a low-risk business. You have to look at your clients. You have to look at the products that you're offering. You have to look at your distribution channels. You have to look at the locations and jurisdictions. Are we doing businesses in any high-risk countries? And then you have to look at them in combination. So are we providing products that are high risk within high risk jurisdictions and offering them to high risk customers, and that is just the highest risk you can ever have? Or are we dealing with a high risk customer, but the product is very, very basic and low risk, and therefore, maybe there's no risk of it being used for terrorist financing and fraudulent activity and anything like that. So it's really about doing a holistic assessment of your products and a holistic assessment of your customer base, geographies, and really seeing where your high risk areas are, and then ensuring that you're putting in place the appropriate controls and saying where we have high risks, this is where we need to put in place, a lot of resources, or if it's not resources, then we need to put technology in place. This is where you have is manual versus automation conversation appropriate. Have you ever heard the saying, you don't want to crack a nut with a sledgehammer? So as much as you're prioritizing and saying, you know what, risk-based approach, we've discovered these high-risk areas and we're putting in place these controls to measure them. At the same time, you have to treat your low-risk areas differently. You don't want to use excessive number of resources or invest in expensive technology for something that is quite frankly minor or negligible risk to your business. So in that case, you can look at it and say, okay, I have $1 million. I'm going to spend 950,000 on this high risk areas and my high risk areas, and I'll spend 50,000 on my low risk areas. So maybe that will be a manual process, and you invest the 950 into your automated solution for suspicious transaction monitoring and flagging high risk transactions and things like that. So it's really about prioritizing your resources, your technology, your skills, to make sure that you have the right focus on the things that are posing the highest risk to your business. And that is what we're talking about when we are talking about a risk-based approach. So I hope this video has helped you to really understand the overarching concept of risk-based approach. And, it's not a one-size-fits-all. What works in terms of a risk-based approach for one business might not necessarily be a copy and paste. You can apply it in another business because their operating model might be different. Their customer base might be different. They might only be a local company, whereas this is a multinational company. So it really boils down to knowing your own business well and thoroughly, and being able to identify where your high risk areas are and making sure that you are focused on those areas and monitoring them effectively, maybe more frequently if it calls for that, and then identifying your low risk areas and making sure that although you might not monitor them as frequently, they aren't totally neglected, because low risk areas can wake up and decide to be medium risk if the operating landscape or regulatory landscape changes. So you do have to keep an eye on them, but really it's not going to be a key focus area in the same way that a high risk area or issue is. Okay? I hope that really helps you and explains to you how you're going to apply a risk-based approach. Understand your business first and foremost. Then look at the controls and how you need to mitigate your high risk versus your medium risk versus your low risk. And then it's also going to impact your approach as a compliance officer in terms of your oversight and monitoring activities, including it in your KRIs and KPIs, potentially if it's a high risk and something that needs to be reported on, making sure that your board, executive management has line of sight of the high risk areas that they need to wear off. Because as I always say, ultimately, the business has responsibility and ownership of those risks. So our job is to help them understand those risks, appreciate their high risks versus their low risks, and make sure that they're consistently implementing the controls that need to be put in place to manage them. Okay. Thank you so much for watching this video and for being part of the KC Compliance Learning YouTube family. I'm excited about sharing more videos with you. And if there's videos that you would like me to do, I don't claim to be the sage of Omaha and know everything there is under the sun, but I do know a lot. But if there is something that I can help you with and create a how-to video for you, then please let me know in the comments. I'll look at the topic and see what I can do to help you. But until the next video, bye.